pursued, our zero bail schedule, for example, Prop 47. There's a bevy of things that are influencing that number. Okay, let's go on to the next. Jail violence. When I took office, it had peaked at this number here, inmate on inmate assaults. It went down steady for 2 years, and we saw an uptick. And you can see that across inmate assaults on staff and use of force. Same thing, it peaked in 2018. When I took over, we saw steady drops, but now you see an uptick in the last year. And again, that is directly reflective of the influence of the pandemic. We decompressed the jail population by roughly 5,000. It's creeped up back to closer to normal numbers. We started at 17,000 and gotten as low as 11,500. Now we're close to 13,000 again. But the nature of the inmate population, the percentage of inmates who are suffering from diagnosed mental illnesses, that percentage continues to rise. It's upward over 36% now. It's been a steady increase year after year. And when we got rid of all the low-level offenders, what you have now is a concentration of violent offenders and an increased number of inmates suffering from mental illnesses. You couple that with a quarantine and the fact that out of cell time has been crippled. Here we've had to, so that definitely has had an impact on just overall tension and the state of mental health of the inmate population. So big concern of ours. And on top of that, when the board cut 1,281 positions from our budget, that was 1,000 positions that were removed from the county jail system. They were trying to force a closure of a jail, which was wildly inappropriate. And at the same time, with a lack of staffing, that did not allow us for the opportunity to do out of cell time for individual inmates. They require single man cells, for example. A lot of things that go along with that. And all this is impacted by staffing. And we're on a path to engage in conflict with the Board of Supervisors, because now the level of defunding has reached a level, and now it's starting to threaten the constitutionality of our care that we're providing our inmates in the jail system. And this is all artificially imposed on us by the funding of the Board of Supervisors. Let's move on. Statistics, personnel. This is where we started at 2019. Now we're down to 17,005, and you can see here the gap there. That's the gap that's missing. That was our vacancies. Our vacancy number is getting bigger by the day. Our patrol stations, we're operating at 71% staffing levels. Which means or they're light duty, they're not available to be put out there on the field to work patrol. So the deputies remaining, the 71% remaining, they have to work twice as hard because they have to cover the absence of the other 29%. And this is not sustainable long term. So again, the Board of Supervisors has frozen our ability to hire deputies while we're going through this massive challenge. They'll hire librarians, they'll hire clerks and all the other county departments, but they don't want to allow us to hire deputy sheriffs. Again, this is going to directly impact public safety. Let's move on. Now, pandemic, our total volume of contacts with the community dropped noticeably. I believe pre-pandemic levels, that was about 2.5 million, went down to 2.16 million. And however, if you look at the use of force related to that, you can see it's statistically it's that small. When it comes to use of force involving a fatality, it's even smaller than that. So the overall overwhelming number of contacts with the public are positive, are necessary, get the job. And this is a major change that is, let me kind of walk you through it. 1991 is the Gates-Johnson settlement agreement between the union ALADS and the County of Los Angeles, where the agreement was that if someone was involved in a use of force or any type of case that required an administrative investigation but was also being pursued criminally, you had to do the entire criminal investigation first and have a resolution from the district attorney before you could engage in administrative investigation. So if you're doing your math, you can realize that that could stretch out a real long time. I'm talking years. And that is problematic, especially in today where everyone wants a result immediately. And the fact is, we don't want to rush to judgment in anything that we do. We have to presume innocence, just like we do in every single case we do, be it criminal, be it administrative, be it members of the public, members of the department. That 14th Amendment that ensures procedural justice, due process, it is alive and well, and it does take time. But there's some things that artificially prolong that time, and we're finding ways to cut down on it. So we did a change. In the circumstances, the criteria are met, similar to the ones that now AB 1506 at the state level provides for the Attorney General is to do investigation of use of force, deadly uses of force where the person deceased was unarmed. We're using some of that criteria now to actually move past the Gates-Johnson agreement. And we provide notification to the unions involved, but we're doing them at the same time. And one case is a prime example of this move forward. You probably remember this case. This is from June 6th of 2019. The day I remember, because that was my first year in office, and we had 3 deputy-involved shootings on the same day. And you want to talk about a stressed-out homicide bureau. They were all over the place trying to get these things. And if you recall this tragic incident, it resulted in the death of Ryan Twyman. The case was presented to the district attorney in about end of 2019. Typically, our homicide investigations take anywhere from 6 to 8 months to complete, depending on the complexity of the case. In the entire case, all the evidence is presented to the district attorney. Then their job is to assess the case and see if the homicide is deemed legal and justifiable or it's not. And then it becomes a criminal case or potential criminal case. And they have to use their criteria to decide if they can prove a case beyond reasonable doubt, for example. But that's where the problem is right there, and that is the hang-up that has really stalled justice in Los Angeles County. And I'll give you a reason why. See right here, we have one shooting from 2016. That's 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I have 12 cases that we have not received a decision from the district attorney. I have 19 from 2 years ago, and I have 8 from 21. This one doesn't concern me because that's still relatively recent. These ones are concerning me. These ones, 2019, there's just no excuse at all. None. That case I showed you with Ryan Twyman, to date, we still have not received a result from it. However, because we did a change of policy in terms of investigating concurrently instead of consecutively, I can now say that we have terminated one of the deputies involved in that shooting. The other deputy received a 30-day suspension for violating department policy. That is accountability. This is something people are unaware of, but it's something we've been quietly doing, and it's just very difficult because we have so many hoops that we have to jump through in terms of holding people accountable. The overwhelming majority of all deputy-involved shootings and all peace officer uses of force that are deadly throughout the nation, the overwhelming majority are justified homicides. the ones that are unjustified or criminal in nature are extremely rare events. When they do occur, we do hold them accountable. But my problem is, I have a district attorney who is not living up to his end of the bargain. These things can be resolved in 90 days, each case. The problem is that the district attorney is playing politics with the cases, and they're withholding them. So they leave two parties on hold, their lives on hold forever. The victims of the deceased, for example, if they're looking for justice, they believe justice needs to be served. They're not getting it because it's in limbo. The deputies involved, who believe they did the right thing, they're in limbo forever until the district attorney comes up with a decision. There is no excuse to wait 6 years for a decision on a deputy-involved shooting. There is none. And 90 days should be the standard. And that's a standard that all the activists out there, they tend to focus on the department. They need to start focusing on the district attorney. And come out with decisions. They're defensible. And stand up under scrutiny. Plain and simple. This is just accountability 101. All right. For our review, we have a very lengthy process. We have the initial incident. We have a walkthrough on the scene. We have our district attorney representatives that are there from the Justice System Integrity Division. The Inspector General is present. Then there's a critical incident review that occurs a week or two later where they go through all the basic facts. If anything is alarming, it rises to the level that we have concerns about the legitimacy of the actions or the decision making of the personnel, well, they're removed from the field. If it gets to the point there's a concern about a criminal together and the amount of work that the DA has to do in determine the legality of it, it's kind of like night and day between the two. So if we can pull it together in 6 to 8 months, they can give us an answer in 90 days. So that's my ask on that. Let's move on. And he's investigating his critics, so there's a conflict. Well, we've been doing public corruption cases for decades, going all the way back to pitches and block. This is nothing new. We just never formalized the fact that we do these things. So we put it together in a public corruption unit. It's run by a lieutenant. There's 9 exception under my administration. They've had 24 cases. 10 of them remain open. 14 have been closed. We concluded that no crime occurred or there's insufficient evidence to make a determination that a crime occurred. And we presented 3 to the DA for filing consideration, and 6 have been referred to the state level or the federal level, either the Attorney General's office, the FBI, and the Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Central District that covers here, LA. And that is it. And remember, we do not investigate individuals. We investigate complaints of crime. So any allegation about any impropriety, well, the facts don't support their claim. And this is just something that is desperately needed, because if you notice a pattern here, when Liebach and Paul Tanaka were indicted and ultimately convicted, it was federal intervention. Jose Huizar, Mitch Englander, DWTP executives from the city of LA, Mark Ridley Thomas, his stint on the Board of Supervisors. Every single one of those cases was a federal intervention. And the public integrity unit from the district attorney's office was nowhere to be found on any of them. In theory, it sounds great, but in reality, the state constitution puts the responsibility for conducting criminal investigations on the sheriff and the prosecution of these cases on the district attorney. So it's kind of like 2 parts, lock in a key, and that's the way it's supposed to work, in partnership. And so right now with our public corruption unit, we are going to ensure that investigations to another agency, investigative agency, and that's just being responsible. All right. Okay, we did an awful lot in the last 3 years, and things that happened this last year, 2021 as well. You're familiar with this laundry list here of things that we've done, and a lot of things have happened that are very good. This one here, the special alert system for 911 calls, huge progress in terms of diminishing the potential of uses of force when we're dealing with mental health crises. And this allows the family of someone who has a loved one who suffers from any type of cognitive impairment, developmental disability, traumatic brain injury, physical limitation, where they could be perceived as others as either threatening, menacing, or harm to themselves. When we know that information ahead of time, it is so important for the deputies, because now they roll to the scene, they have the information, it's actually told to them over the radio. They're going to a house where someone has this type of a condition, and this is the triggers, and this is the person they can contact who is a good calming effect on the person involved. We also roll our mental evaluation team on the same call, the field supervisor on the same call. We remove all other calls from that deputy's buffer. So what we're doing is we're slowing down the clock. We're giving the best opportunity for a positive outcome so the person involved who's suffering from some mental health crisis gets the care they need. It may be a 72-hour mental health psychiatric hold in a facility suited for that, and this is the best way moving forward. Very positive. It's available throughout LA County Sheriff's jurisdictions and all of our patrol stations. You can download it online, and we're encouraging all police agencies, if they have the same capacity on the 911 system, to use this system. It's going to save lives in the long run. And go back a bit, 1 second. Here's another one. That number there, 19.1. We're now leading the nation. Large law enforcement organizations having the highest percentage of female sworn. And but for the hiring freeze from the Board of Supervisors, we would have already been in the 20% range. So that is a big step forward. Okay. And obviously we did all, if you recall, the 8 Can't Wait drive from the civil unrest from last year and that movement, we had most of the policies already in our system, but they weren't specific enough, so we made it in plain English, blunt, so they're easy to understand. And that's duty to intervene, duty to cooperate, whistleblower protection, and all those. So those are all part of the policies and procedure of this department. By the way, this is called reform. Okay. Now, for 2022, we have a lot of things going on, a lot of challenges, and the challenges keep getting bigger. Okay. The body-worn cameras, you can see, we haven't deployed in all the patrol stations right now. The last one, Avalon, is happening this month as we speak. And we found already returns on the body-worn cameras. They're positive. Decrease of reported complaints. All the stations have had it for 1 year. 43.4% decrease in reported complaints. That is statistically not just significant. In unscientific terms, that's a ginormous drop in complaints. All right? That is important. You can see on 6 months, decrease of 25%. So it's working. The body-worn camera system is working. So if there is a complaint, we urge people, make a complaint if you're unsatisfied with the level of service you received or how you were treated. Let us know about it, because that's the only way we can fix a problem. All right? But we're taking a new twist on it. Go ahead. February 1st, we're going to start testing the body-worn cameras in custody. And we're going to be the first, or one of the first, definitely the first of a large county jail system. This is a big... And also on February 13th, we're going to start live streaming body-worn cameras. So when deputies are actually interacting with a person suffering from a mental health crisis on the streets, they can live stream it so the mental evaluation team, as they're rolling there, they can actually see what's going on in real time as it's happening. And they can provide input and guidance of how to proceed forward. So these are all big steps forward in terms of public safety and accountability. Okay? Okay, now... You've seen this video before, and this is violent crime, and we have a big concern throughout a county about violent crime. You saw the smash and grabs, brazen robberies, organized retail theft, all these things that were happening. And system related. Small independent cities that surround the city of LA as well. And let's see here. I know you've seen all this, and this came out on Channel 7. Let's see. But we want to show you something here that is tied to all this. One is, before we go to the next, remember I talked about the zero bail schedule. It has to end. It cannot continue. There's tragic results with a zero bail schedule, as we will be discussing. Okay, now let's listen to this.
We've always said from the very beginning, public safety looks different for some people. Some people feel safe when they see someone in a uniform. Others feel the absolute opposite. They feel threatened and intimidated when they see someone in a uniform.
Well, you recall this happened on January 13th, where the nurse was killed. She was punched, knocked unconscious, head hit the concrete, and she was critically injured. That was on the 13th, which was a Thursday. She ended up dying on Sunday from her injuries sustained. And that was by a homeless individual who was arrested a short while later, not too far from the scene. And that was Supervisor Janice Hahn. That was her opinion about law enforcement presence on our transit systems. And this person died on the transit system, waiting for a bus after getting off on the train at Union Station. So we really have to, now we're gonna see how the logic is behind this. And this is the big concern that I have. Let's go on to the next slide. This is MTA Board Chair Hilda Solis. This is what she said when she took over as the chair of the MTA board. You want to increase homeless outreach and decrease the presence of law enforcement on the transit system. Or words to that effect. Those were her words. You heard the words from Supervisor Janice Hahn. And now, let's take it one further. The Public Safety Advisory Committee. Remember, the lady was attacked on January 13th, which is a Thursday, at 5-something in the morning. On Friday, the Public Safety Advisory Committee of the MTA Board released a list of recommendations for the MTA Board. The contractor that refers to PD should not respond to calls to address mental health issues identified by a requester for service. Oh, that's great. Let's not do it. May respond if they are requested by a trained dispatcher. So the trained dispatcher is actually going to supersede the experience and the judgment of the law enforcement people who are actually really trained. This is a very bizarre statement. And I asked my staff to give me just the top 5 that you can say. I think there's like 24 points in their document. And they said they were at a loss to pick which was worse of the top 24. So they came up with these ones. Contractors should not respond to calls to a police address or otherwise interact with any unhoused individual on the metro system. Wow. There you see it in writing. This is the Public Safety Advisory Committee that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors, by the mayor, and by the city council, members of the city council, and a couple of mayors of some cities. That's frightening. Should not respond or interact with any unhoused individual on the metro system. I will note this. Brianna Kupfer, the UCLA grad student who was killed tragically, 24 years of age. The suspect, who was still on the run, was a frequent rider on the MTA system and unhoused. And I guess law enforcement shouldn't contact him. All right. Their contractors should not be engaged in intelligence sharing of any kind with any local, state, or federal law enforcement agencies. This one, I believe, might actually run afoul of federal law because we're supposed to talk among state and federal agencies and share intelligence because transit systems are the target of terrorist attacks. You need to look no further than London, France, and all the different attacks. New York City, their subway was an attack. I think Japan at some point was also their transit system. What on earth are these people thinking? Lord Jesus. The contractor should not utilize or impose surveillance technology on the system. Yeah, let's not use cameras. Let's not use CCTV. Let's not use anything that might help us catch a bad person who's being assaulted because we're seeing it on a surveillance system. I mean, I don't even know what's going through these people's minds. Obviously, they're not people that use the trains and the buses every day. The contractor should not engage in any anti-terrorism operations or proactive terrorism prevention activities. This is in writing. This is your Public Safety Advisory Committee. And this was released on Friday, the 14th. On the 16th, the nurse died. And she was in critical condition while they're doing this debate. And this is what they came up with. They also want the law enforcement to not participate or to defer. To remember, they talked about and we have to defer to decisions of the ambassadors on the trains and the subways. This is just bizarre stuff. I mean, it's so wildly irresponsible. And in light of the tragic things that are happening on the train as we speak, and there's a lot more coming out from our transit systems and the threats that I don't even know where to begin. And then we get this. After the tragedy, I will continue to push for an enhanced safety plan for riders so we can prevent tragedies like this from happening again. Well, Chair Hilda Solis, I have the first push for you. Get rid of your entire Public Safety Advisory Committee. All right? That's the first step towards improving safety on the transit system. Replace them with 15 riders. Hey, I could take 15 riders anywhere throughout the system, put them in a room, and they'll come up with a plan that looks nothing like that nonsense you just read right there. Yeah, that's a huge concern. So the question is, Hilda Solis and the whole MTA board has a lot of explaining to do. Their infatuation with ambassadors and they're decrying the presence of law enforcement. The overwhelming majority of the public supports law enforcement. The people who do not support law enforcement or are afraid or intimidated them, as Supervisor Hunt suggests, are the people that are doing something they shouldn't be doing. As they say in Spanish, el que nada debe, nada teme. And that's just utter nonsense. So a lot of work to do there. Let's move on. Homeless Outreach Service Team. Well, our host team, they've been knocking it out of the park wherever they've been. And this is 2021. You see all those dots, the county map? They've been in all these places. And in spite of what the critics say, they have not made a single arrest. They have not had a single use of force, but let's see what they have been doing. Yes, they went to Venice Beach. They started doing outreach and assessments. Venice today. San Vicente Veterans VA Hospital. That's what it looks like today. Olvera Street, right out here. We're down to the very last half a block of clearing up the entire Olvera Street. And I went through there yesterday and I talked to some of the merchants, and we've definitely rounded a corner of Olvera Street. And I point out that in spite of our experience with the city councilman that oversees Venice, I had an entirely different different relationship with Kevin De Leon, who oversees Department of Mental Health, our homeless outreach service team, and we had a lot of success. Turns out there was some activists that are actually trying to force people and bribe people to stay on the sidewalk because they believe that any effort to put people into shelter is somehow wrong, and that they employs hundreds of thousands of Angelenos. No, your self-determination does not come at their expense. So if someone's going to be inconvenienced, it's going to be you, all right? And we're definitely going to provide the shelter space, the services they need for mental health, substance abuse. We need to have the county actually do their job, treatment. But what this shows you is that our host team model works. It is a solution. Attention, Governor Newsom. Yes, we know what we're doing, and we have success to point for it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, he says he rejects the claim by me that the state's homeless plan isn't working. Okay. Well, the fact that it's increasing in size and not decreasing, say, I think some work around accountability, new planning metrics that include county sheriffs. Well, when you establish this planning metrics, it would have really helped if you actually consulted with the county sheriffs. I've yet to find a single sheriff out of the 58 in LA in the state of California that can say the resource that he's been provided as well. Well, we haven't been provided a penny. Quite the opposite. We're losing as we're being defunded and destaffed. So all that money that he's going to put towards the homeless is going to be fed into the homeless industrial complex, and none of it's going to make it to law enforcement and our hosting, unfortunately. This Prop 172, that half-cent sales tax measure, was supposed to supplement or supplement our budget, increase services. The county has been using it to supplant our budget. So if we receive $100 million, we don't receive the resources we need to meet the greater level of challenges. Same thing with AB 109, the prison realignment. All of that money that the state promised to push to the county, it was part of it supposed to go towards the county jail system, so we could increase our capacity to provide rehabilitative services to our inmate population. Nope, we've been losing money. In fact, they did an audit, a state audit of 3 counties, including LA, commissioned by Supervisor Hilda Solis. She demanded the audit, and the audit results came back. Yeah, you're depriving the county sheriff of the funds needed to provide the rehabilitative services. They're sitting on $1.6 billion that they squirreled away, and they gave to every unit other than the county jails where we house all the inmates that need those rehabilitative services and programming. So I'm glad the governor is excited about his plan, but he failed to find out a way for that money to get into the hands of law enforcement and sheriffs in the county jails in particular. I'm more than happy to sit down and talk with him about that. We both belong to the same party, but we're at opposite ends of the same party, unfortunately. And like I said before, and I poke fun at the woke crowd, but I will say this again. They deserve a seat at the table. They need to be heard at the table. Then we have a big problem, because they're the only voices being heard. You're leaving everybody else out of the conversation, and that is a bad foundation for public policy. Okay, so okay, let's go now Illegal cannabis. Yes, the high desert is full of these things, and that was June 8th of last year, and we seized a record amount of illegal cannabis grows, and it was harming the entire Antelope Valley in so many different ways. We put a dent in it. Unfortunately, from my detective division, I have 218 detectives not available out of 794. More than a quarter of my entire detective division is missing because they're vacant positions, 130 vacant positions, and the rest are impairments, injured on duty and all those things, or light duty. So I'm operating with only less than 75% of the detectives I need, while I'm facing a 94% increase in homicides. I'm facing a massive sprawl of these illegal cannabis grows in the high desert. We need the bodies. We need to unfreeze our hiring so we can get deputies in the academy, push them to custody, out to patrol, and there's seasoned patrol veterans and station detectives we can push to the homicide, narco bureau, major crimes bureau, fraud and cyber crimes bureau. We have to keep that pump primed so all these career progression happens, and we have seasoned investigators in all these positions out there serving the public's interest, keeping everybody safe. All right, and yeah, that was a 1.2 billion estimate in street sales of illegal marijuana. That was quite the big operation, and we could employ all those resources for an entire year, and we might eradicate it in the high desert. It would take an entire year, but we don't have the resources to keep them up there that long. So we have to do it in bits and spurts. And while we tear one down, I got two more popping up somewhere else, a mile away. Rail corridors. You saw the news coming out. The images are just horrendous. And December 20th, Union Pacific Authority sent a letter to the district attorney, and they were complaining about the fact that over 100 cases or so they gave them about grand theft, stealing from the freight trains, and they were just reduced to trespassing or dismissed outright. So there was no consequences for stealing. And this is what no consequence for stealing looks like. This is a District Attorney George Gascon's idea of evolving criminal behavior. And look at this important point here. Like our customers, Union Pacific is now contemplating serious changes to our operating plans to avoid Los Angeles County. Now, in the past, I've talked about the impact of tourism to our gross domestic product. $18 billion a year economy for LA County. That is more than a third, or roughly a third of our entire gross domestic product. And probably the number one employer in Los Angeles County is the tourism industry. And we're willing to just give it away to the encroaching homeless population. But now, on top of that, 40% of the entire nation's cargo comes through the LA and Long Beach ports and goes through the Alameda corridor, gets loaded onto trucks or on trains to then make their way east. And they want to contemplate changing that? Think about what that means, what that entails to our economy. We're just giving away entire sections of our economy because they're just too incompetent to realize or unwilling to understand that we have to be safeguarding all of our vital economic interests. That's a matter of life and death. And that train derailment, for whatever reason, I don't think is by accident. And we cannot afford to have any more hiccups like that. I need to have these people being able to run their business safely so people can expect it's a safe process to order products, have them delivered, and get to their destination reasonably safe and on time. I mean, this is like economics 101. All right. Now, again, staffing levels, yes, we need to hire more. We need to get that hiring freeze lifted. We have all these big events coming up. We have all those challenges of our current problems with violent crime, homelessness, and we're not going to do it by shrinking the size of the department. Right now, we're at about 9,500 sworn. We should be at 10,300 minimum. And that still makes us the most understaffed law enforcement agency in the entire nation. It's not even close. If we had the staffing level of Chicago PD alone, we would be approaching 20,000 sworn. That's how understaffed we are. We're so used to this model. It's an artificial model. And right now it's being challenged and is harming the community. So a lot of work ahead of us, and most of the board I cannot count on, but I'm hoping and praying that by June of this year, and the new elections and the new districts that have been redrawn, that we're going to have more moderate and sensible supervisors that are actually going to listen to the needs of the community instead of their agenda. It's driven by ideology, not by facts. So with that, any questions?
Oh, good morning, Sheriff.
Morning.
That was an abrupt end. A couple of questions. I want to go back. You talked about a lot of the stuff that's coming up in the future. Can you do a quick review of the status of investigations against your department with the Attorney General's office? I mean, there was a big push here locally, wanted to, they're after the department for various reasons. I'm just wondering if you can give us a status on any investigations against the department.
Well, for starters, you got to realize that was a political decision. It wasn't driven by facts on the ground. And the outgoing Attorney General, Javier Becerra, did that in his last week in office. They even bothered to give me a phone call on it. So it was definitely a political payback on his way out the door to the Board of Supervisors. They're colleagues. They served together in Congress. And one of the main proponents of this was Mark Ridley Thomas, who's now been indicted by the feds. So the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out, I can say this, that we're cooperating fully with the State Attorney General, and we're providing all the information that we have. Are there areas that we can improve? Of course they are. But they are out of control. There's something horrible is happening. Quite the opposite. We're actually doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We hold people accountable. We have all the documentation in the world to show them that. They have all the information. The Inspector General has all the same information that the AG is receiving. So a lot of the questions that are being asked on behest of the Inspector General. So there's too much politics involved in this to assume it's a clean operation. But I'm not afraid of anything they find. If there's something that needs to be fixed, we're going to fix it. We're going to move on. But there's no grand criminal conspiracy that's going to be uncovered in any way.
And speaking of that, then, one of the things LAPD Chief Moore mentioned the other day in his end of the year review, too, is that they're having to look at a transformation in how they train officers, uses of force and mental health and things like that. Is part of your plan moving forward any kind of a redo or refresh in use of force training?
Our use of force training is good. I think it conforms to all the changes. A lot of the changes that have come out from the state legislature, for example, like AB 392 and all that, we were already there. We didn't have to change our policy to conform to what Sacramento is doing, because we're always a step ahead of Sacramento in terms of understanding what the challenges are emerging. And so we're already there. And what the challenge is, with the minimal resource that we do have, to train our department for one day, it costs us $7 million. 1 day of training, 8 hours of training. That's how expensive it is. So we're going to continue to make sure that our training is relevant, that the information is assimilated and then is used in the field. And when we have any incident that sparks our concern about the decisions that were made, for example, the deployment of the AR-15. You saw the caper in Santa Clarita, prime example. We thought, well, that was not right, and we needed to address it. So we took a hard look at the AR-15 deployment, and we tweaked it to make sure it was the right reasons to pull that weapon out, for example. So we're constantly being very proactive in terms of the need out there. Sometimes, though, unfortunately, you don't find out something is wrong until something bad happens. You say, well, why did that happen? But to think that we have to do a wholesale revisiting what we're doing, I think we're on the right path, and I think our department tends to be at the forefront of training throughout the nation in law enforcement practices.
My final is just that you continue to be critical of the Board of Supervisors. Has there been any olive branch in your time in office, has there been any kind of an olive branch between you and any member of the Board of Supervisors? Have any relationships improved over your time in office with any members of the Board of Supervisors?
Well, the Supervisor Barker, I had a conversation, a meeting with her just a few weeks ago. Very positive conversation, and she has now offered some funding for the cannabis operations in the high desert that's in her district, and that's a positive. It's a plus, and my door is always open to work with the board and doing the right thing, defunding the department, and that it does not work because the community is suffering directly as a result of their decisions, not of our actions. So I need to overcome that, and if I can't get that from the current board, I'm hoping the community will give me a more moderate board that will definitely make public safety a priority.
Thank
Pete?
you,
Sheriff, if you want to go back on the idea of how many personnel you actually had, you said about 9,500. Ideally, you should have at least 10,300, if not more.
Yes.
If the board does give you the funding to start to do hiring and to get academy classes going through here, how long is it going to take to get up to, forget 10,300, that's a BS figure, you know it, I know it. You should have been having about 18,000 people about 15 years ago. But nevertheless, once that funding comes in, how long is it going to take to even get up to 10,500 in the department, let alone shift them into detective positions as they gain seniority?
Well, it's kind of like as you move people into it takes about 9 months from hiring somebody one day to actually have them working, trained in the county jail. It takes you 9 months. So that's going to be 5 months of the academy, another 3 months of custody training, and another month of orientation. So by the time you're 9 months in, you finally got that one result that pushes that custody deputy, another deputy, to patrol, that pushes the patrol deputy to a detective spot, that pushes that detective to a specialized assignment like homicide and all that. So we have people waiting in the wings that need to go to homicide, to narco, to major crimes, to Special Victims Bureau. But we don't have now is the ability to hire to create the vacancy. So it's kind of like a big train that pushes everything through. What the county did is they interrupted the train. So now it's dying and we're actually shrinking when we should be growing. That is a threat to the public safety.
But we're talking 5 academy classes, 6 academy classes?
No.
7, what?
We need to do 8 a year to maintain the status quo. To make up for the lost positions, we need to do 12 a year. About 1 a month, we need to crank them out.
And you don't have the funding, or does it exist at all?
Oh, the county is sitting on $2 billion surplus, and they've admitted it. The funding is there, but I have one supervisor, Holly Mitchell, who said she basically swore that not one single dime more is going to go to the sheriff's department. With that mentality, we're not going to go anywhere. So we have about 1,000 applications already signed, sealed, and delivered and approved, waiting to hire. In fact, as I pointed out about the sworn female percentage, our last class has been 33% female. So we're way ahead of the entire nation in terms of diversity and inclusion. So they've interrupted this process with their hiring freeze. Sir.
With this, obviously the second we put it out there publicly that there's been a more than 90% increase in homicides, it's going to scare the hell out of the public. You can't hire right now, so the department is somewhat crippled. How long do you think it's going to be before residents start to take measures into their own hands to protect their home and property, and does that concern you?
Oh, it does concern me, and we're seeing evidence that has been registered in all our licensed gun dealers. I think it's been, 100% increase since the pandemic began. And it's people that usually is people that live in rural areas and certain ideologies that tend to be more the ones that collect guns. Now it's everybody, liberal, moderate, everybody's out there trying to arm themselves. So a lot of that, unfortunately, is going to fall in the hands of the wrong people.
And do you feel that in this political climate we live in, do you believe that the board is targeting the department or targeting you?
Oh, they're definitely targeting me. Remember, they did not endorse me, support me in any way, and I think they've created a hostile environment for me to operate under since I took office. It's decision after decision, agenda item after agenda item. In fact, we counted up all the negative and agenda items from the board, and it was like, I think, 10 to 1 almost. I think they counted a total of 9 positive or supportive board motions, and it was about, I think, 73 negative. And that, it's hard to explain that, but the fact is there's political animals that they view this as a game, and they have to defeat the sheriff because, fill in the blank why. We represent accountability, an independent check and balance to the board, myself and the district attorney, in theory. Because remember, the board is both the legislative and the executive branch of government, which is a horrible combination of the two. So there is no internal check and balance there. There's no oversight for the board. There's no inspector general over the board. We need to see the board increased, doubled in size. We need to have an elected county official who acts as like a mayor for the county. So we have a true elected executive, and we have a true legislative body. And then the DA and the sheriff should always be independent. And with that, and an elected inspector general who oversees all of county government provides oversight. Because right now, it's just a political farce. The inspector general, the Civilian Oversight Commission, they've proved it every single day. Sir.
Regarding the rail thefts, when we were doing that story, we were told that there actually used to be a specialized unit in the Sheriff's Department. I think they're called the Cargo Cats, or they focused on cargo. Can you talk about, does that still exist? And also, has Union Pacific reached out to you guys about the thefts for any help?
We're working with the rail, and we're working with our federal counterparts, LAPD, and we're going to put together a game to, one, stop the nonsense right now and to start working to secure all the transportation corridors. And it's sad that it got to this point, really, because it was unnecessary. And now the lack of a prosecution is a huge problem, because, you know, you make 100 arrests and they don't file a single one. The crooks start knowing that, and they realize, I'm going to be out. You can't do anything to me. So they operate with impunity. And we're not going to stop doing our job because the DA doesn't want to do his job.
But as far as the specialized unit, did one exist?
Oh, the Cargo Cats, yes, it did exist, but again, we got defunded. Remember, we've lost 25% of our detective division personnel. Cargo Cats was one of the victims of that. And in fact, a good friend of mine, Gerald Pachuca, he was one of the last ones of Cargo Cats, and they were extremely good at what they did. And they were nationally recognized experts, but if there's no funding, they're a victim.
We're over here too.
Ah, there you go.
Thank you. A couple questions on some of the big news headlines that you talked about that I wanted to get your opinion on. The suspect in the Brianna Kupfer killing, the
Yes.
suspect in the nurse attack at the bus depot, and I think even Jacqueline Avon suspect, they all are believed by authorities to be homeless. Beyond the MTA issue, do you have any thoughts on that? Yesterday, Chief Moore talked about the mental health crisis on the street.
Well, you have a mental health crisis. You have an absolute lack of sufficient psychiatric beds, secured psychiatric beds. In fact, I think one station had booking photos of the suspect involved in the killing of Brianna Kupfer from 2010 to today. He was arrested in October of 21, and he was released based on the new bail schedule. He should not ever have been released. He would have been I think he was arrested possibly for possession of stolen items. Used to be a felony, now a misdemeanor. Got out on a ticket in October, and just a few months later, he's killing Brianna, you know, right at the start of her life. I mean, that's such a tragedy. It's horrendous. And the fact is, there's people like that walking out amongst us. We have an open-air mental asylum. When we closed all the mental facilities back in the 60s, Lanterman-Petraeus Short Act, it was a Republican governor, it was a Democratic-controlled legislator, and they said, well, we're going to defer everything, it's going to be community-based alternatives. They were never created. That was the explosion of Skid Row right there, and it's where we're at today. Now it's accelerated because now LA County itself has become a magnet for the nation's homeless. We have 25% of the entire nation's homeless is right here. In fact, the board did their motion to support, the homeless. But then again, when it came, we asked for, okay, we need the funding to suppress homeless encampments in the fire danger areas. We needed 24 deputies, 8 for Malibu, Topanga, 8 for the St. Gabriel area, and 8 for the North County area. And 0. So they made a motion, oh yeah, we want to support it, but then no money attached to it, so the motion was absolutely worthless because it's not changing anything on the ground. We need those beds, but instead of adding beds, we're losing beds. St. Vincent Medical Center is closed. You go Metro Hospital in Norwalk, sprawling campus is half abandoned. We have the land, we have the buildings, the staffing is available through the Department of Mental Health, but the Board of Supervisors thinks somehow it's not compassionate. So we are allowing killers to walk freely amongst us, people that are exhibiting serious symptoms of mental illness. Look at the one that killed a young girl at the Burlington Coat Factory. His behavior, he was there for about a half an hour prior to start assaulting the people with that bike lock. Under normal circumstances, that would have been a call immediately, 911, and to seeing people behave erratically in public, that it doesn't draw attention until someone gets killed. And that's just, we've been desensitized to the fact that people need help. They cannot be safely walking amongst us. That's just a fantasy. The status quo is not working, and the board needs to start, they need to knock off all the virtue signaling that's going on over there and start doing hard decisions based on facts that are going to make the community safer, which is funding law enforcement, funding mental health facilities, funding substance abuse facilities, and hard beds where we can put somebody in them. Right now, we don't have that.
And then just to follow up on the MTA recommendations from the Public Safety Committee, those were recommendations, so they're not things that your department is following right now.
No, we're not following. In fact, if they were to adopt those, we will not even bid on the contract. We will walk away. And my recommendation to all of them.
And then is your department already policing that bus depot where the nurse was attacked?
No, that is in Union Station. That's in LAPD's area, City of LA.
Sheriff, there was, you didn't mention this, and maybe it's way off the radar screen. We still have Bend Central Jail that is, 60 years old? And
yes.
There's been calls continuously for its demolition, not its modification, not its upgrading. Absolute get rid of it. Is that anywhere in the future?
Well, they hired, again, the board loves to hire consultants. They hired another consultant for this one, and the consultant told them, you cannot demolish the jail unless you have alternative bed space created. The board thinks that they can just demolish the jail, and that's 4,500 inmates with no place to put them. So I could send 1,000 inmates to each one of the district supervisors' field office. That'd be an interesting delivery. But in reality, when they voted against the mental health treatment center that was going to replace Bend Central Jail, they actually condemned the facility to at least 10 or 20 more years of existence. Because the activists, the decarceration crowd, you can't get well in a cell. You've heard all the nonsense they talk about. They said it's an expansion of the system. We were actually going to lose 1,000 beds in the deal. But we're going to absorb the loss and redistribute, the different populations, the different security levels, and make do while they build a mental health treatment center, because it was going to provide single-man cells for the severely mentally ill who were also suspects in very violent felonies, including murder, rape, arson. When they voted down that project, they paid an $80 million penalty. They didn't tell the public about that. $80 million penalty for not building the mental health treatment center. That went to the construction companies that were out of work from the project. That was a penalty, I guess a non-performance penalty. And where was Plan B? There was no Plan B. So right now they have set aside $40 million for a jail closure implementation team. What are they doing with this? They still have to provide an alternative. If there's no alternative, Men's Central Jail, that dungeon-like facility, is going to live on because it has the only place with 1,000 single-man cells that can house the most dangerous.
Have you had an increase in CCW permit applications as a result of all this rise in crime?
Yes, we have seen an 8,865 applications. We've issued 2,125. Another 307 are pending. And yes, we've seen the big uptick. Some of it was because we actually made the good cost standard a little more actually achievable than past sheriffs. It was almost impossible to get one. And we were flooded with the applications, then civil unrest hit, and then that just doubled the number of applications we started receiving.
What's the average turnaround time for one of these?
Well, initially 6 months because we just don't of applications received.
Thank you,
One
sir.
more question,
Sure.
and we're going to go to Spanish.
Sir.
You have placed a lot of blame at the feet of the Board of Supervisors and the District Attorney today, but I kind of am curious as to if you can look back on the previous year, maybe looking forward. Is there anything that you wish you could have done better or differently given the resources that you do have?
Well, with the resources we do have, I think we've leveraged them every which way possible. I started with a $101 million deficit. I was defunded 2 years in a row to the tune of $145 million, then $116 million. Lost 1,281 positions. We finished the fiscal year 20 to 21, which is June 30th of last year, with a $22 million surplus. So we actually met all the financial marks possible, but it came at the cost of degrading our capacity to fight crime, to prevent crime, to investigate crime, and ultimately, hold people in jail because of their involvement in crime. It came at great expense to the public safety. Could we do anything different? I'm being hard pressed because really we were doing everything we could think of to expand our ability. We had to take on tasks that previously were not even thought of, like taking our homeless outreach service team, expanding it from 4 deputies to 26. That was a big move, but it was very, very important because it brought results. Because we were in danger of losing our entire tourism industry due to people thinking, well, it's okay, let's not do anything. So, if someone could point out something we could have done better, I'd be more than happy to entertain it. But really, nothing obvious that stands out that we missed the mark on.
Can I sneak one in?
Sir.
Well, I'm in front of a bunch of sheriffs, man. Can I sneak one in?
Sir.
As this gentleman mentioned, you've pretty much slammed the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the board is slamming you.
Mm-hmm.
And the board, to a certain degree, and I've heard this from, I won't say names, but in order to right the ship, we need to get rid of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like in order to right the ship, we need to clean house and bring in a new board. Who in the hell wins? Where do we go from here?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'll tell you this. The board slams, in fact, their 2 main areas of attack were, accountability or transparency. Have you ever tried getting anything out of the county? I have a transparency page. I do weekly Facebook, Instagram Live. I take questions directly from the media, from people. I've done 84 town halls since I've been in office. I can't get more transparent unless I was literally translucent or something. And so the transparency thing is nonsense. Accountability, well, we're holding everybody accountable to the rule of law. We're making great strides in improving in the areas that are troublesome, and like the Gates-Johnson settlement agreement, and that with the doing dual-track investigations, criminal administration, that is a huge move forward. It's been something that's been very difficult for us to overcome. So we are making strides in both areas. And I would challenge the board to do the same. Show us your transparency. Show us your accountability. Show us what happens. For example, DCFS. We lost Gabriel Fernandez. We lost Anthony Avalos. We lost Noah Quattro. And I'm pretty sure there's another name we're losing as we speak. And then, oh my God, this and that. Instead of inventing other departments like the Office of Child Protection, you know, to make up for the failures of the other bureaucracy, how about stop building bureaucracies and start focusing on making things work and being transparent? And so, no, the public is suffering, and I feel it because I'm out there with the public every day. I'm talking to them directly. I don't hide back. Fortunately, 15 members of my department to COVID. So we're doing what we can with what we have. And remember, the board did not support my election at all.